So in addition to causing intestinal permeability and killing good bacteria, glyphosate also binds to beneficial minerals in the soils, in the plants, and in us. So it was originally made as a chelator. It bound to minerals so that pipes could be cleaned from mineral growth and things like that in the pipes. So that's what it does. It binds to metals and minerals. And this has been shown. Minerals in the soil are bound to glyphosate and are either not absorbed in the first place, or they're absorbed but they're unusable to the plants that have absorbed them or the people that eat those plants. Now you can see this study, now this graph over here shows, so the smaller line here is how much iron got into the roots of the plants, and you can see that decreased by 50% after an application of glyphosate. And then from there, how much iron actually went to the rest of the plant is like 15%. So, and the same story, even worse so, for manganese. And then zinc had a little bit better root uptake, but about the same amount of translocation to the rest of the plants. You can see glyphosate has affected the uptake and the utilization of these minerals drastically. And the kicker about this is, look, it's residual or drift glyphosate, right? And you'll see it was 2.5% of the recommended application. So we'll look at that in the next slide, but before we go there, Samsel and Seneff's 2015 paper, Glyphosate Pathways to Modern Disease 3, it's like a 50-some page paper, and all it talks about is the depletion of manganese by glyphosate and the vast amount of different things that can cause in our bodies. And when was the last time you had your manganese tested? Clearly, you can see glyphosate inhibits manganese availability in plants. Therefore, it's not getting into the plant, it's not getting into us, and whatever manganese we do have is at risk for being chelated as well by the glyphosate. So, from that same study that showed that, you can see 2.5%. Where's my pointer here? I can't find it. 2.5% of the recommended dosage. So they were trying to simulate what would happen if a farmer next door was spraying his crops and then the wind carried it onto your farm. Some people have shown that 10% of that application can actually transfer into neighboring farms. And this study, they just looked at 2.5% of the recommended spraying. So these are not genetically modified crops, but these are regular plants that have been exposed to a very minimal amount of glyphosate. And this is what happens to the root systems after 3 days. And this is what happens to the leaves of the plant. It inhibits their ability to make chlorophyll. You can see the green color has kind of left and it's more like a pale, gross yellow. And that's 2.5% of the application of glyphosate. And that is from the inability to move minerals throughout the plant. Okay, so another way that we know glyphosate affects our bodies, it suppresses our detox enzymes. This enzyme, for example, cytochrome P450, it's a whole class of enzymes that's responsible for detoxifying any kind of foreign substances that should not be in your body. And it's well known to do that in bacteria, plants, and animals. Now, glyphosate and other organophosphates have been shown to reduce the expression, so your body makes less of these in the presence of glyphosate, and the ones that it does make don't work as well in the presence of glyphosate. And you can read this paper if you're interested, because there's so many ways that it does this. I can't get into them. I just have to tell you, this is what it's been shown to do. The cytochrome P450 enzymes contain high concentrations of glycine. Again, we're going to talk about that in a little bit, why that's so important. Glyphosate also reduces glutathione by reducing the availability of the amino acid cysteine, and 2 pesticides that were also tested did not do the same thing. So glyphosate has been shown to reduce the expression of cytochrome P450 enzymes, reduce their efficacy, and also to reduce amounts of glutathione in the body. So we're going to talk about glycine now. You can see glycine on the right-hand side here. Excuse me. And you can see the structure of it. And then you see the structure of glyphosate and AMPA. Now remember, AMPA is the main byproduct of glyphosate degradation in the body. You can see how similar these molecules are to glycine. And we'll see why that is important. Okay, they are structurally similar. Because of this, they have been shown to competitively inhibit the enzyme that makes glycine from serine, another amino acid, by up to 95%. So if you've got AMPA and glyphosate floating around in your cells are like, oh, we don't need any more glycine, we've got it right here, mistaking those things for glycine. This study, this is interesting, we'll talk about this a little bit. This study showed that this happened in cancer cells. So the application of glyphosate to cancer cells suppressed their glycine production, which then killed the cancer cells. And they noted that it didn't kill the normal human cells. However, higher doses did end up doing the same thing to normal human cells. But what they established, forget about cancer for a second, what they established is that glyphosate and AMPA competitively inhibit glycine synthesis in human cells in a dose-dependent manner. The more glyphosate and AMPA exist, the less glycine your body makes. That's a fact that's been established by this study. Now, let's talk about cancer. Did I just say that glyphosate selectively killed tumor cells while leaving the human cells, normal human cells, alive? Yes, I did say that. However, let's not jump to using glyphosate as a cancer treatment, because high doses of it also killed the normal cells. The lower doses are what killed the cancer cells and didn't quite affect the normal cells yet. Also, the study only lasted 3 days, so who knows what would have happened at those low doses, even to the normal cells, in time. Also, glyphosate has many other deleterious effects, and it is not an argument to say, well, glyphosate killed cancer in this study, therefore we should let it be in our food. No, that's crazy. That would be like saying, well, we use radiation as a cancer treatment, so why don't we just all expose ourselves to low levels of radiation all the time? No, that's nonsense. We don't want to do that. So glyphosate as a cancer treatment, not yet. Okay, so we talked about the ways we know glyphosate affects your body. Now we're going to talk about some more theoretical ones. And in my opinion, this is where the science is going to go, and we are going to find out for sure these things are happening, and that's a big reason why so many people are getting so much sicker in the past 20 years. So theoretically, glyphosate substitutes for glycine during protein synthesis, resulting in faulty proteins. Now we saw glyphosate suppresses your production of glycine. So now the next step of that is glyphosate steps in to take the place of the missing glycine when your body makes new proteins. Also, it's been theorized that glyphosate enhances the cellular uptake of aluminum and arsenic and multiplies their toxicity, and it also causes depression and anxiety behaviors in mice by altering their gut flora. And by extension, we could theorize that that also happens in humans, and we'll do that in a minute. But first, glyphosate substitutes for glycine during protein synthesis. So again, we see how similar the molecules look. Glycine, essential amino acid, or a critical amino acid, used to make many proteins in the body and plays an essential role in these proteins, meaning that in the chain sequence of amino acids, This glycine, if you take that out and put a different amino acid in, it drastically changes the structure and the efficiency and the function of that protein. That's what we mean by essential amino acid, and we'll talk about that later. So theoretically, because they're so similar in shape, could glyphosate or AMPA be plucking glycine out of that sequence and inserting themselves, therefore slightly warping the shape of the protein, therefore decreasing the effectiveness of those proteins? So we do know that exposure to glyphosate has been shown to increase the amount of proteins that correct DNA. So let me try to say that better. It increases the expression of proteins that identify and correct mistakes in the amino acid sequence. So you apply glyphosate to a cell, and the cell starts making proteins to fix DNA. So somehow the glyphosate is making the cell think that the DNA is getting messed up. Is that because the glyphosate is substituting for the glycine? We don't know, but we do know that glyphosate increases the rate at which protein structures are degraded and rebuilt because they're faulty. So here's just a quick little fun slide. We're talking about glycine and it being an essential amino acid. So you can see all these proteins here. These are proteins that have essential glycines that have been studied. And you see all the references here. This is from the Senef and Orlando paper. You see all the references. What these studies all did was they took the essential glycine out of its respective protein and substituted it with something else. And then this is what happened. So one amino acid being switched for a different one glycine amino acid being switched with a different amino acid in one spot in the amino acid sequence causes these things to happen. That's how important glycine can be in your protein structures. Now, this is just kidneys. This is just what could happen in your kidneys if each of the glycines were replaced. So this gives you an idea of the significance, how important glycine is in the right place in your protein structures.